Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Hello and welcome back to Cameron, King of the World. And we're about to talk about a film that wasn't directed by James Cameron, Alita Battle Angel from 2019. So why on earth cover a film that isn't directed by James Cameron in a James Cameron series? Well, it kind of is a James Cameron film. It was directed by Robert Rodriguez, but it was very much a James Cameron project, an idea, and remake of a previous source material. To be completely clear, this is based on an existing manga and anime called Battle Angel Alita. Well, there is the actual Japanese name is much different than that, and I can't really pronounce it, but the English translation is Battle Angel Alita, which was then changed to Alita Battle Angel for this movie. Now, I've talked about in previous videos, if you may or may not have seen those in the series, where in the late 90s, Titanic had been a huge success, and the two projects that Cameron was eyeing up was Avatar and Battle Angel Alita. And I remember reading about that on the internet at the time, around 2000, and the domain names like Battle Angel Alita .com had been kind of registered online. So it seemed like Cameron was gearing up to do that, but he ultimately got pulled in the direction of doing more deep sea exploration and then 3D movies based on those expeditions. And when it came to, what am I going to do next? Avatar was the one that won out, and he mentioned how it was really the environmental kind of theme of that movie that made him decide to push for that film first, because he felt like it was a pertinent topic of conversation that might raise some awareness. And I think also for Cameron, I would assume, again, this is just me assuming, this isn't an actual, I haven't read an interview where he states this as such, but I think that for Cameron, Avatar was probably something that he could sink his teeth into more because it was his creation, whereas Battle Angel Alita was something that already existed. But he was a huge fan of the original source material and really wanted to make a movie about this, a live-action version of that story. And he'd been trying to do it for a very long time. He'd written a 186-page script and had 600 pages of notes, and he just wasn't ready to hand it off to another director. But as Avatar came out, became a huge success, and he decided he was going to fully, focus his attention on the Avatar sequels that he had in mind. Battle Angel Alita just kept falling more and more into the rearview mirror and out of sight almost. And so eventually it got to the point where I'm not sure when he first started considering the idea of handing this off to another director. But Robert Rodriguez came into the mix in 2015. He was kind of considered to take on this project and to direct it. And what Cameron decided to do was to give him his script and see if he could rewrite it in a way that he felt was suitable. And I think that perhaps it was the script that Cameron was really holding back on, was finding a good basis and a good grounding on which to get this film made if he wasn't going to direct it. And I guess he trusted Robert Rodriguez because he went away and rewrote it into what he would kind of have as a shooting script, and Cameron was happy with that. He'd had another writer work with him on the script as well, so it went through a little bit of rewriting and molding into a different form, but ultimately became something that Cameron was happy with and agreed to hand over the reins to another director to make this movie. So in 2016 into 2017, this film went into production and was filmed around that time, and so there was a good 2 years of post-production, visual effects work, and obviously the main character, Alita, was going to be a complete visual effects creation using obviously CGI technology, but also motion capture performance, and would be portrayed by Rosa Salazar, who portrays this character of Alita. And I remember kind of hearing about this film and not being too intrigued by it. The first trailer came out and it was very much like, oh, what the hell are they doing here? Like, this character, Alita, I mean, she looks kind of cool, kind of badass, but she's got the big manga anime eyes, and in a realistic CGI rendering, it just doesn't, it looks weird. And they talk about the uncanny valley effect where you see a human created with digital, computer animation, and it just doesn't feel right. There's something off about it, and that's something Cameron really wanted to get right with Avatar, and I feel like they really did get that right with Avatar. I don't know whether we've seen a fully rendered human face using CGI that has been completely convincing yet. So seeing the trailer for this was like, ooh, it looks a little bit strange. And I think they did some tweaking, because that original teaser, it looks a little bit different to the final film. And I think it was supposed to come out in maybe summer of 2018, because there was a big pushback on the release date, and it finally came out in February of 2019. And I was intrigued because Cameron was kind of behind it, kind of wasn't. I like Robert Rodriguez as a director, but it was really just for me a film to go and see, because it was the film that came out that week, really. I was living in London at the time, and we'd go to the cinema fairly regularly, pretty much every week. And it was just another film to go and see. And let's go see what that weird kind of big eyes, movie is all about. And I went to see it, and I absolutely loved this film. I thought it was fantastic. A side note, a very weird side note. I have this nice poster that had come out when the film was released, and the cinema we used to go to at the time, you could pick up the free posters and stuff. So I got it, and I got it framed, and it looked really nice, and I have it just on top of my Blu-ray shelf in the corner. I thought, I could put that behind the Blu-rays here, be a nice background, because I have an actual poster of this movie. It's a cool poster. It's got Alita with like the Damascus blade and stuff. It looks really badass, so I thought I'll put it in the background of the video. This would be really cool. I reached up to my Blu-ray shelf to kind of pull it back, and I accidentally pushed it in the wrong direction, and it slid and fell all the way down the back. So to take that out, to fish that thing out again, I'd have to take about 300 Blu-rays off those shelves, strip everything off, move all the shelving units out of the way, and retrieve the poster. And honestly, I just don't have that kind of time, and I can't be fucking bothered. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that for no real reason at all. I've gladly wasted a minute of your life with that terrible, pointless, meaningless anecdote. On with the film. So I loved it when it came out. I was really surprised by it, and I still think, having watched it a few times since then, that Alita is the single greatest achievement in CGI when it comes to rendering a realistic looking character. Now, I would also say on kind of the other end of the spectrum, but still on the similar kind of spectrum, I think that Caesar in the new Planet of the Apes trilogy, the Caesar trilogy I like to call it, particularly in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War of the Planet of the Apes, is one of the best, if not the best, example of CGI, like a motion capture performance that has been created with computer animation. I think that Caesar is probably the top dog, but when it comes to a CGI character that is meant to look somewhat human, I think Alita really takes that. I mean, it's I don't think it even won the visual effects Oscar, which is ridiculous to me. I mean, there are some moments where her face looks a little weird, and obviously it's going to be really hard to maintain complete and total consistency throughout the entire film. This is a 2-hour movie, and she's the main character. But there are a few instances, particularly when she first wakes up after she's been put back together again, and her eyes open, and just you can see the fucking pores on the skin, the little tiny hairs. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. I'm glad they delayed the film a bit to, I'm assuming it was to work on the... I'm glad they delayed the film a bit, I'm assuming, to work on the visual effects and stuff, because it just really paid off. And the eyes, even the mouth, like her mouth looks a little strange because her teeth are a little bit odd, but I just think that you just forget about it. You forget about it being an effect. And that's really, even like, I mean, the hair, I mean, there's so much that, maybe, I mean, it's not an entirely 100% like fools me, like it looks like a human. You can tell that it's a visual effect, but it's done so fucking seamlessly, to the point where it's just, those lines are starting to get more blurred, I think, and it's both exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking about the future of where all this technology is going, but it's still a very expensive thing, so I don't think it's going to be so widespread that it's going to become an issue per se, but especially with deepfake technology now picking up over the past couple of years, things are going to get a little bit strange, I think, and we might be on the cusp of things really becoming problematic when it comes to how you can digitally create a face and a performance, especially with, I mean, as all of the story, I'll leave that there, I'm not going to get into that whole thing. Let's just talk about Alita. So the film follows this character of Ido, this doctor who he used to work on kind of building these robotic parts for people who would take place in these motorball events. It's like I don't know, what would you call it? It's like kind of the roller derby kind of style, but it's like a violent kind of, you're on skates, you're on wheels, motorized wheels, and it's a bit like Robot Wars, but there are these like these kind of augmented humans, and it's a really cool kind of concept. And so he was this guy who used to work on the races, and then he kind of got disillusioned with it, and now just kind of helps out people who need spare parts, spare limbs, and things like that. And so he's working this small kind of almost little hospital just out in the slums, basically, in Iron City. Iron City is this kind of just big jumble of humanity, and it takes place hundreds of years into the future, I'm imagining, where there was the fall, a big kind of, earth-altering event in which, things change forever, and there used to be floating cities, and there's one left, which is called, what's it called? I watched it 2 nights ago. What's the film called? The floating city is called, the guy who runs it is called Nova, and it is, I've forgotten. I've completely forgotten the name. It might be on the back of the Blu-ray, which might give me a quick assist. No, it just says, in this epic adventure of hope and empowerment, a cyborg, Alita, searches for clues from her past when she awakens in a future world she does not recognize. What is the place? I don't know, but it's a floating city, and it's kind of like what would you call it? A bit of a metaphor for kind of upper class and the way society works, I suppose, and how you're not allowed in to kind of the big kind of the top tier, the kind of the real extravagant rich, and so this city is this like elusive thing that everyone's trying to get to, and I, for the fucking life of me, can't remember what that place is called. Iron City is an easy one to remember, but so Alita is this this kind of android kind of cyborg who is found in a trash pile by Ido, and he finds her, and it's just kind of the head and the upper torso, and he finds her. He gives her a body, and then she wakes up. So she's been kind of non-functioning for a long time. What's really interesting is that her brain is human, and I didn't realize this until maybe the second time I watched the film, where it's like, oh wait, she is kind of human, and it's a really fucking like scary, not scary, but like horrifying idea and concept that your brain is human and the rest of you is all synthetic. And there's even a character, one of the hunter warriors in the movie, who are these characters who they're basically vigilantes, but kind of quasi authorized by the government vigilantes to kind of, there's no police anymore, so these hunter warriors, they kind of take up these bounties. But there's one of them played by Ed Skrein, who this British actor, I'm assuming he's British because he's got a very British accent I think I've seen him in a few other things, and his character has got this, he's got the pretty boy face, so he's just like almost entirely just this metal contraption, like a fucking Terminator, but he's got this very pristine, just the face like that, and then a little bit of hair on the top, and they talk about how he spent all his money on his face. So, it's this weird thing where that some of these, I'm not sure if like some of the characters are completely androids, but there is this this weird kind of part of the story where, Alita has a human brain, and I want to know like the backstory to that and know more about the lore and everything, which is why I would love to see some sequels, but we'll talk about that towards the end. So Alita gets rebuilt and kind of brought back to life. It's almost like a Pinocchio kind of thing. By Ido, he finds this, almost, she's just pristine, like her brain is intact. He brings it back, and I'm not sure if her heart, like the core of her heart, was there. I think it was. I think it was part of the torso that he found, because it's so powerful that her heart could be taken out, the thing that powers her, and it could be used to like power the whole city for like years. So that's a very lucrative piece of equipment that I'm sure he didn't have lying around. So again, I'm not like the biggest expert on the movie or anything. I've only seen it a few times, but I think her human brain was still working, and the heart, the core was still there. I guess he just needed to kind of rewire it back to life or something. So he's now brought this girl back into existence, and they start to unpeel her past, and he knows a little bit more about her past than he's willing to let on, because there is a lot more to her story, which does get revealed throughout the film. And whenever she gets into these situations where she has to fight people, situations of moments where she has to kind of, the fight or flight mechanism kicks in, and she goes to fight. She goes into defensive mode, but she is willing to attack and defend herself using brute force. and all these techniques of fighting that she didn't even know that she had starts to just naturally flow out of her. And when she gets into these situations, these antagonistic situations, she has these flashbacks of her previous life, and that's just a really interesting. I love the way that her character begins to unlock all of these memories and stuff, and she finds a new body which is incredibly powerful and much more agile, and she just turns into this kind of potential killing machine. And you know, the story is really well done in terms of the way it sets up the characters. And I will say that the one of the negatives about Alita is that it does feel very, and I'm not really the best at talking about films like this, but it feels a little bit cliche at times, and I enjoy the way that it feels cliche. And there have been a few films over the past few years that have felt like this to me. They felt like 90s movies, the films that I grew up with, in which they do have these cliched elements to them, but they really embrace them, and it just becomes more endearing than it is cringeworthy. One of the big ones would be Mortal Engines. Like, it's a really super cheesy movie, but it just owns it, and it's just fun, you know, and you get into it. And it's the same with Alita. There's some really cheesy moments. I mean, there's a part where her love interest, so there's this young guy who she kind of falls for. And I like how she asks Ido, who becomes kind of her father figure, but I like how she kind of keeps him at a distance as well. And she's like, "You're not my father, you know, let's just make that clear." She has her own personality, but she's trying to figure out her footing, and it's just a great character because she's constantly learning things and learning how she wants to feel about things, learning how she feels about morality and how things should be done, and kind of figuring out her past, how that plays into her future, and all that kind of thing. But there's this young guy who she becomes infatuated with, and at one point she kind of opens her chest up and says, "I'd give you anything, I'd give you my heart," and she holds it out. It's a really fucking cheesy bit, but it works because her character is such a naive person at times, and there is such an innocence to Alita that that a line like that and a gesture like that really works. Conversely, there's a moment when they have a kiss, and she's like, "Does it bother you that I'm not completely human?" And I like that. I like the delivery of that. I like the weight of what she's saying when it comes to that conversation. And then he says, "You are the most human person I've ever known." And the way he delivers it is really cringeworthy, and there's no getting around it. So I think some of these cheesy lines, it's about the delivery and the conviction. And it's a nice scene. Like, I like the way that it's lit and everything, and I like her performance in it. He's a bit more, you know. So there are certain bits that don't work in terms of the more campy, cheesy lines of dialogue and things like that. But it is just such a fun, it's such a fun movie with a great world. The world building is really great, and the visual effects are mostly phenomenal. There's just some really great stuff going on, and there's some great action sequences. I love the use of slow motion in some of those action fight sequences where you really see what's going on. I think in the motorball sequences, when Alita gets involved in it, they're cool, but I think that there's so much going on. I do struggle to keep up with some of the, not even the geography, but some of the choreography of when she's fighting some of these guys in this fast-paced scenario. It gets a little bit jumbled for me. It's still very cool, and the staging of it is very good, but the actual nitty-gritty of the choreography gets a little bit lost in translation for me at some points in those sequences. We have some cool kind of villains. We have Jackie Earle Haley playing a kind of performance capture bad guy, and he's a really cool kind of big hulking kind of just pieced together through all these bits of machinery. And then we have Jennifer Connelly, who I'm a big fan of. She plays I don't know why I keep thinking about these wrestling things, but she's kind of a tweener. You know, she's kind of 1 foot in being a good guy, 1 foot in being a bad guy, and you're kind of wondering where her allegiance is going to fully set by the end of the movie. And there's a lot of history between her and Ido, and Christoph Waltz, I should mention, plays Ido, and he's a great actor, and he really brings sufficient weight to that character, who is so key to Alita's development. And Rosa Salazar, who plays Alita, is phenomenal. Like, she just really breathes that kind of naive life to the character. Her eyes are big, and they did that for a specific... she's not entirely human, right? So I think that the manga eyes actually really works, and it's not as exaggerated as maybe the first teaser made it out to be. And you really get used to it, and I think it's just a cool... I don't know, it sets her apart a little bit, and I think it also helps with convincing you of that character, because if it was a fully meant to look, completely photorealistic to an actual human with the same dimensions, I think it would have been more difficult for the audience to get behind the character. With the eyes, it gives her something different, and it's not too cartoony. Let me just look at, it's not as like extreme as you think it is in your mind's eye. When I watch the film, I'm like, oh, they're not as huge as I kind of imagine that they are, even after I've seen the film a couple of times. And so the design of her really works, and it also helps to kind of convey some of that innocence that she's going through. It's like the kid looking with the wide eyes at the world that they've just discovered, and there's some great moments when she's discovering things like chocolate or what fruit tastes like, and how much she enjoys it. There's lots of great little character moments like that. Some of the score is really great, and I just think that it's a brilliant world. The only thing that really bothers me about the film is the fact that, and it's strange because the ending of the film, and if you haven't seen the film, I would suggest stop watching now. I'm going to talk about the ending, how I feel about it, and all that kind of thing. But the ending for me, I loved in the cinema because it was different. I wasn't expecting it. There was a little bit of disappointment, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was a really cool, fucking unique ending. But the ending does set up a sequel. There is no denying it, you know. And Cameron said that when he didn't want to set up Avatar to make loads of sequels, he wanted Avatar to be more of a self-contained thing with, you know, the possibility of continuing it. And it is, and it's strange because, you know, Avatar and Alita, both these two projects that Cameron was percolating, you know, for a long time and was really, you know, trying to figure out which one he was going to go with in the late 2000s or the mid 2000s, I suppose, when he was fully, you know, getting himself geared up to make another movie, a feature film after the documentaries. I think that it's intriguing because both films end the same way. Both films end on the eyes of our main characters, who are both CGI motion capture characters. So Avatar, you end on Jake opening his eyes. He's now in the body of the Na'vi, having made the successful transfer, spoilers. And with Alita, we end with a zoom in on her eye and going straight into the iris, and then we have the title and the credits. But both, you know, have a similar ending with the eye of the main character, but they both have very different feelings. Avatar feels like that could be the end of, you know, obviously there's more story implied, but that would be a really good ending to that story, you know, forever. You know, I think that I wouldn't, if there was a world in which Cameron said, I'm not making any more Avatar films, I wouldn't feel like I'd been left hanging. With Alita, I feel like I have been left hanging, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I admire the gutsy move to go with such a cliffhanger like that, where Alita decides she's going to go after Nova up in that city. Oh, it was almost on the tip of my tongue. What's the city called? No, it's gone. It's gone again. So she wants to go after Nova, who's this kind of evil overlord, who's kind of, you know, he's kind of overseeing the kind of the evil that goes on down in Iron City. And you kind of just wonder why the fuck is he concerning himself with all the peasants down below when he's got his city up. And that's a cool thing. We never see the city, and I like that because it makes you want to see more of it in the sequels, perhaps. But we end with Alita kind of rising up in the ranks with the motorball career, and then she pulls out the blade and she points it up at Nova like, I'm coming for you, motherfucker. And he looks down, takes off his little goggles and just kind of looks down with a grin like, yeah, bring it on. And it's Edward Norton. And at first I thought it was actually James Cameron because he had the similar hair and face almost as Cameron, because it's kind of a grey hair look they've got for Edward Norton in that character of Nova. He has no like lines, so it's kind of an uncredited cameo, I believe. But it sets up, oh shit, it's going to be Edward Norton in the sequels, right? But it's such a great, like, I'm coming for you, motherfucker. She pulls the blade up, and then we just zoom in on her eyes, and it's like, bang, Alita, Battle Angel. I love it. It's still a really cool ending. It's not the ending that kind of disappoints me anymore. It's just the overall feeling that there is so much more to do, you know. And it's a shame because I watch it now, and I rewatched it a couple of nights ago for the first time in 4K, which is really great. And I'll talk about that in a second. But throughout the whole film, there's this kind of not even disappointment, but just this kind of I don't know. I'm viewing it through a lens of bittersweetness the whole time, because it's like, this is such a great setup to more. This is a great origin story of Alita as a character. Now I want to see her go off and have a proper adventure. Now I want to see her go off and do something epic. I want to see this grand sweeping saga unfold. You know, it doesn't have that kind of payoff that a Star Wars has at the beginning of a trilogy of a big adventure where, like, you know, this big victory. There is a victory in this film, and that's another thing I like about it, is that it doesn't have that traditional, you know, this big goal at the end where it's like you defeat all the bad guys. She does something really cathartic, I think, at the end of the film in terms of, you know, slaying a villain. but it's not the big villain, and it's not this grand thing. It's a very personal victory for Alita in this it's a very small scene. But you know, that line when she's just, you just made the biggest mistake of your life underestimating me, and it's just like, oh yeah. But it's building up to this thing that doesn't happen because it would happen in a potential sequel, which apparently, you know, well, not even apparently, it just doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen. And the reason for that is the film wasn't very successful. And I have a theory, which isn't like the best theory in the world, and in fact, I'd say that if I was given the choice to put this theory into effect through some magic, I would say no, don't do that. My theory is that if they had released this film and promoted it as a James Cameron film, directed by James Cameron, and you know, nothing changed. Robert Rodriguez was the guy who did everything, but they just put in the credits and on the trailers, directed by James Cameron. I think that it would have made more money. I don't know if it would have made enough to make a sequel, but I think that would have got more people there. I think that Cameron at this point has that name value. I went back to look at the Avatar trailer recently, and it's just like, you know, from the director of the Terminator, Aliens, Terminator 2, True Lies, Titanic, like most directors, it'll just get from the director of this film and that film. This is like running through his almost entire filmography, with the exception of The Abyss, and it almost gave me chills because it's just like, holy fuck, he has built such a resume of fucking great movies that when a new movie comes out, they're fucking listing off his whole resume. You know, he has a name value, I think, and while with Titanic and Avatar, they both captured something in very different ways that got people coming back to the cinema, new people coming in through word of mouth. I do think his name value, because he doesn't make films that often, it becomes an event. But at the same time, that then leaves Rodriguez in the dust, and that's not fair to him. And it would be a grimy move, like publicly. And when the truth came out, it would be a really bad look, you know. So it's a theory, but it's not one I don't think should ever have been done in reality. But I just think that, hey, if they just said this was a James Cameron film, it would have made a lot more money, I think. And I think that there was a lot of trepidation about the film. I think maybe releasing it in February wasn't a good idea. Maybe they should have just waited until the summer of that year. But I don't know what the big summer tentpole movies of 2019 were that they were trying not to compete with. So it's a tricky thing. Timing is everything. And I think that the film made just over $400 million worldwide, which is a good amount. And here's the thing. We've talked about Cameron's previous films, and obviously Titanic and Avatar were huge moneymakers, but you know, Aliens, let's just look at Aliens from 1986. You know, it made, I think, just over 100 million and was considered a really big success. Alita makes 400 million and was considered a little bit of a disappointment, not quite a flop, but it's been theorized that they lost money on the movie because to break even they would have had to have made at least $500 million, and they didn't make that. So it's the budget, it's the marketing, and it's a shame. It's an unfortunate circumstance because in a world in which we have all these superhero movies being thrown down our throats, and I love most of them, so I'm not too fussed about that. But you know, you have a lot of people out there who are complaining about getting the same thing over and over again, and here are movies like Mortal Engines or Alita Battle Angel, where it's like, or even Valerian, The City of a Thousand Planets, these great science fiction, and they're all based on previous, you know, existing, you know, material, but these fresher science fiction blockbusters, and people just aren't going out to see them as much. And whereas the Marvel movies, you know, you're guaranteed to make $600-700 million at the bare minimum, and you're probably going to make $1 billion just based on the fact that Marvel Studios plays at the beginning of the movie. And again, I love the Marvel movies, but it's become such an empire now that it kind of tramples over any other potential, you know, similar movies that play with a lot of big visual effects stuff in a science fiction setting, and it's a shame. So since Alita came out and it became clear that a sequel probably wasn't going to happen, a kind of movement began, and they called themselves the Alita Army. And it was this big social media thing, and it was about promoting a sequel, and I think they got a plane either doing smoke trails or a big banner flying over Los Angeles saying "Make Alita 2," something like that. So there's been a big push for an Alita sequel, and in fact in 2020 they were pushing for cinemas to re-release the film, and James Cameron did confirm they were looking into re-releasing Alita in October of 2020, just to kind of show the studio that you know, this is the fan interest that exists. It never happened because of the whole COVID thing and cinemas, you know, reopening and then shutting again and so on and so forth, but also the fact that Disney acquired 20th Century Fox, which then became 20th Century Studios, and do they want to get behind that? Did Disney want to go with a franchise that does have that kind of, it's not like a hard R, but it's like it's a more darker, that there's swearing, there's violence, it's pretty grim, especially the fate of, say, Jennifer Connelly's character, which is a very intense moment, I think, in the film, for me anyway. I'm remembering that scene, and they're going to send her up to, what is the fuck? I'm just get my phone. I'm so sorry, but it bugs me so much, and I like to do these videos without having to look at my phone or interrupt the video in any way like this, and I could just edit it out, I suppose, but it just bugs the shit out of me when I've forgotten something from a film that I really love. And they talk about this fucking place all throughout the movie because it's all about getting to that city. It's this elusive thing where the characters, all of them, their goal, well, not all of them, but most of them, their goal is to get, and it's kind of this pipe dream, and it's seen as this impossible thing, which is why it would be so great to see a sequel, to see how that story of getting up to the city unfolds, and how Alita brings the fight to Nova, and all that kind of thing. Right, so it's set in 2563, so 500 years into the future, and 300 years after Earth was devastated by a catastrophic war known as the Fall. So, Zalem. I was almost thinking Zion. Yeah, so the city is called Zalem. It's almost not what I thought it was in my mind's like, it was on the tip of my tongue, but it wasn't quite that. So anyway, Zalem is the place. And yeah, so the 4K Blu-ray I thought was really good. It is an upscale. Unfortunately, a lot of these modern films don't get finished at 4K, so you're not really seeing a true 4K resolution image. They've upscaled it, but there is more detail than the regular Blu-ray. I've looked at some screen comparisons of the regular Blu-ray disc and the 4K, and there is more definition there. The image is a little bit darker, but there's just more detail. Not anywhere near as much as if it would have been a full, legit 4K resolution transfer, unfortunately. But, the film looks great anyway. So it wasn't like this revolutionary, oh my god, it looks incredible in 4K thing, but, it's a film that looks really good regardless, and it was nice to just know that this is the best possible version I can see it in quality-wise. But yeah, so Alita, I love the film. I really, really do, and I just always feel a bit sad that there's so much more that could happen. And in just last month, January of 2021, Robert Rodriguez has said in an interview that he would love to do more, and that he has hope that it could happen. And with Disney Plus, maybe that's something that they could look into. And there's already a built-in audience for this. There's a fan base for this, and I don't know. I don't know if the fan base is big enough to really warrant a big movie like this in terms of the budget. And that's another thing. They changed the title from Battle Angel Alita to Alita Battle Angel, which was kind of a reluctant move on James Cameron's part, but his producing partner, John Landau, who produced Avatar and also produced Alita, this film, he convinced Cameron to change it to Alita Battle Angel so that they could open it up for future sequels. And Cameron said this in an interview. I don't know if it's like to read too much into it, but he said that in the future we could do, we have Alita Battle Angel, then we do Alita Fallen Angel, and then Alita Avenging Angel, things like that. And that to me just instantly, invokes this kind of imagery of a grand trilogy where, Fallen Angel will be like The Empire Strikes Back, where it's a big battle and something bad happens to Alita and the bad guys win. And then we lead into this big kind of just knockdown, drag 'em out fight in the third movie, Avenging Angel. She comes back for a vengeance, and there's this big kind of conclusion to it. It would just be great to have a trilogy of these films. And I know that I've criticized in the past these studios who say, we're going to do another Terminator trilogy, we're going to do a trilogy of this, we're going to do a dark universe, and I do get wary about when they just look, they look too far ahead, But to be fair to them, they didn't say this is the beginning of a huge trilogy. They didn't say this is the beginning of a series. They said, this is the film. If we make money, which we hope we do, we would like to do more of them. And I think it does ultimately operate well as its own film. But it ultimately does feel, the more I watch it, as this kind of great kind of grounding for something to jump off even further. And so I'll always love the film. I'll always enjoy it, and I've watched it pretty much every year since it came out, which has been a couple of years. But I tend to kind of look forward to watching it again. But I don't know. I just hope that it happens. And the good thing, at least, is that Rosa Salazar, she's not going to age out of the role. She could feasibly play Alita for another 30 years because it's it's a digital creation, and she loves playing the character, and she's really great with the fans, and she really wants to make more. And so I don't know. I just think that it really should happen, but I try not to judge the film based on the fact that there aren't going to be any sequels, probably, but it's hard not to watch the film and think, if only, and this is so good that it could be so much more. And I feel like I've talked too much about that in this video, as opposed to just focusing on the film itself, which I think is it's a great science fiction action film. It really is. There's just great moments, and I would love to do a deeper dive on it, but I don't have much time. I'm kind of running towards the end here of this James Cameron series, but it's a brilliant film that wears its heart on its sleeve, much like Alita does, and people criticize the screenplay for that, and I can see those criticisms, but to me it just it gives me that warm fuzzy feeling of the movies I grew up with in the 90s and even from the 80s, where there are cheesy elements to it, but there is a really good story behind it too. But I do feel like the story, it doesn't have that kind of release of a big payoff, because it is ultimately building towards more, and that's the only thing that I dislike about it, I guess, is just the cold hard fact that it's probably the one and only Alita movie we'll get to see. I'd like to go and see the anime. I think there's like an hour-long anime movie, which might have stemmed from a couple of TV episodes or something like that. And I'd even like to read the manga. It's a world that I would love to explore more of if we're not going to see any more in live action, but fingers crossed one day we'll see it. Otherwise, we've been left with, I think, a really damn good film, one that I enjoy so much, and there's a lot more to say about it, but I'll leave it there for now. So thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.